So once again, welcome everybody, and thank you very much for joining us in this educational and powerful Lunch and Learn. As you know, this Lunch and Learn is sponsored by Family Partners of Maurice in Sussex County. Today is joining us Amber. Welcome, Amber.
Hi, how are you?
Wonderful. I'm doing very great, and thank you very much for being here with us.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. Amber is a recovery specialist from the Center for Prevention and Counseling. And lastly, this is your host, Patricia Houston, and now we are going to jump right into the topic in which we are going to learn about harm reduction for sustained use, right, Amber?
Yes, absolutely.
Wonderful. So, Amber, let's just start this conversation by highlighting why it's so important to have this type of conversation in relation to harm reduction.
So harm reduction is something that's been around for a long time, and over time, the stigma surrounding harm reduction practices has begun to change, and I'm happy to be a part of the solution. And just to define harm reduction, it's an approach that meets people where they're at, promotes health in a way that incorporates policies and programs that aim to reduce the harms associated with substance use. And the reason why I find harm reduction as important as I do is because I've seen firsthand through my work and also through my own experience as a person in long-term recovery, how difficult it is for people to stop using substances altogether and be able to access proper care and help to do so. And between the time in which somebody is using and is maybe considering stopping their substance use or reducing their substance use, there's a gap that needs to be bridged. And that's where harm reduction can help us by providing people with an opportunity to still have the type of support that they need to lead healthier and happier lives, and also maintain their life and being able to survive through the dangers of their substance use.
Amber, can you point out some of the substances that people use most commonly with a higher risk of tragedies?
So I would say what we've all heard and know by now is that the country is experiencing an opioid epidemic. So we hear a lot of publicity about the way opioids interact with individuals and how often people succumb to fatal overdose. Opioid use disorder also entails a number of infectious diseases that can come along with intravenous or ingesting substances in any other way. So that's a very commonly discussed topic. But when I, heard this question, I also think of alcohol use and how prevalent that is in our society and how many fatalities every year are also caused by alcohol use. And it's less discussed, I think, because we as a society have accepted that far more than we can accept people that have a substance use problem, such as opioid use disorder. But those, I would say, are the two most commonly dangerous substances that cause the most fatalities. But that being said, especially with the introduction of fentanyl, which is an extremely powerful opioid and has made its way into the drug supply, which has really increased the overdose fatality rate, that's also becoming incorporated into different substances. So somebody may be ingesting something they think is Xanax or they think is cocaine, and this can include trace fentanyl or all fentanyl, and unfortunately lead to overdose and death. So the danger surrounding substance use can come along with any substance, but I think primarily what we're dealing with, especially here at the Center for Prevention, is a lot of alcohol use and opioid use patients, unfortunately, dealing with some really serious consequences. But as also we do see people who are ingesting fentanyl unknowingly and unfortunately succumbing to that, passing away.
And can you point out some of the strategies that you think people can use to prevent harm reduction in substance use?
Yeah, so there's a lot of different strategies that go into a harm reduction practice model, one of which is discussing with people what safer substance use looks like. And what a lot of the time, the basis of what I'll talk to people about is it's so important to never use alone. never use behind a locked door. So that way you're able to get help immediately if you do overdose. Also, things obviously like being not drinking and driving, reducing the amount of alcohol you consume. And that's the same thing with opioids or any other substances. So talking about safer use practices is really important. Also providing people with the information that they need to access things like medication assisted treatment, which is a utilization of things like Suboxone, methadone, Vivitrol. These are all things that can be used to treat opioid and alcohol use disorder. Well, Vivitrol can be used to treat alcohol use disorder as well as opioid use disorder. So harm reduction as a concept really encompasses a lot of different strategies to help people prevent substance related harm. And I would say the primary focus of a lot of our conversations with individuals and families is about safer substance use and what that looks like.
Yeah. And why do you think most people sometimes hesitate to call for help?
So not everybody knows, but I believe it's become more common knowledge. But the Good Samaritan law in New Jersey protects individuals from being charged with possession of substances and possession of paraphernalia charges when they call for help if somebody's experiencing an overdose or other medical emergency. So historically, before this law was in effect, when you called for help for somebody that was overdosing, you run the risk of being charged as well as that individual that has suffered an overdose. And now, that's no longer the case. People are protected from that. And it's to encourage people, to call for help for their loved one or for that, making sure that the people around them understand how to call for help for them. And the important part about the Good Samaritan law is it's important to stay with that individual after you've called 911, and that is how you maintain that protection for yourself and the individual, the legal protection. And also just being able to be prepared in those situations. I think a lot of people lack the preparedness, and that may also cause them to be more nervous or less likely to call for help as well. But that's something that we're able to help people with, especially providing people with naloxone, Narcan brand name, where the is used to reduce the effects of an opioid overdose.
And what can you tell me about the statement, start low and go slow? Would you please elaborate on that?
So when we talk about things like safer substance use, one thing that we mention is starting low and going slow. And really what that means is instead of using a large amount of substances at once, or what somebody would typically use to get the desired effects of that substance, is instead really testing out the potency of that substance. You're less likely to experience an overdose if you're using a smaller amount than you are a larger amount. And also trying to spread your substance use out through a period of time rather than using closer together. So using every hour would be more dangerous than using every 5 hours. And being cautious, of how much you're using also really greatly reduces that.
And why do you think it's not recommended to use any type of substance or to drink alone?
So when you're using alone or drinking by yourself, if there's anything that happens to you in that scenario and you're by yourself, you're unable to call for help and no one is able to call for you, that is that's where you see a lot of substance use related fatalities. And that's evidenced by something that I actually really am excited about in the harm reduction world. There's a helpline called Never Use Alone. And what that number is a number that people can call 24 hours a day. It's a national helpline, and they can stay on the phone with somebody while they're using. And what happens is that if that person becomes unresponsive, the volunteer who answers the helpline number will call for emergency services and alert them of an unresponsive individual at a certain address, and EMS can come and properly care for that individual. So when we talk about how important that is in reducing substance-related fatality, it is evidenced by the success that the Never Use Alone helpline has had. And I believe it's, I actually have it written down, from up until April 15th, they have had 50 calls where they needed to alert emergency services to an unresponsive individual. And each one of those people had survived their overdose. So being able to access that helpline where they were on the phone with somebody who knew what they were doing and was able to call for help, these 50 people who survived their overdoses would most likely not have otherwise. So it really goes to show that making sure you're in the presence of someone else, or if you can't be, utilizing a service like the Never Use Alone helpline is going to add an extra layer of protection. And that's a huge way that we can empower individuals who use substances to protect themselves.
That is a big number, huh?
Yeah, that's, I think, one of the most amazing resources that I've come across. And I've worked now at the Center for Prevention as a recovery specialist for 5 years. And when I learned about this helpline number, it felt like very freeing for me as a helper to be able to know that, we're putting this information in the hands of people that really need it and allowing them to make that decision about their safety. So it's really exciting. And I see that Yvonne said she hasn't heard of the helpline number, and I can actually provide that to you guys in the chat if you'd like me to do so.
Yes, and I also want to remind everybody that the contact information for Amber is right there in the chat already, website, and also there is a helpline in there as well. And if you guys need additional information, the Family Partners website is listed there as well. And below this video, when we finish it, the information for Amber and the website, everything will be right below this video. So you guys also gonna have access to that information below this video. Amber, what can you tell us about the equipment that people use and the concern in regards to the sterilization aspect of those equipment?
So when people use substances, they can use them in many different ways, ingesting it orally, intravenously, which is utilizing syringes, or by sniffing them. And a lot of people will use things like straws or rolled up dollar bills. And in the process of using it intravenously, as an example, there's a lot of different aspects that go into that. So people utilize something that they call cottons. They utilize either like a cap or a spoon, water in order to inject their substance. And all of these aspects of their substance use can cause infection if they're not using sterile, clean supplies. So one way that that's been kind of being combated in New Jersey and across the country is through harm reduction centers. There are a number of them in New Jersey that provide people with safer use supplies. So that way we're preventing things like secondary infection, staph infections, things of that nature, abscesses. And then also you can, if, even through utilizing straws, you can pass different types of infections on from yourself to somebody else, things like hepatitis C or HIV. It's lesser known that that's one way that people can contract those viruses. And the other thing that is, I think, important to mention is now in New Jersey, over the last few years, it's become a law that pharmacies can sell somebody up to 10 syringes as long as you're over 18 and have a photo ID. That's another way that people can access those safer use supplies. So something that I've addressed before, how a lot of the time what we hear in the news is about overdose fatalities. Lesser known or heard of issues do include things like sepsis or MRSA or abscesses that really are a common cause of fatality amongst people who use substances, and including things like hepatitis C and HIV, which cause long-lasting impacts on our health. Although hepatitis C is curable now, these are all things that are really important as well for people who are using substances and, to maintain their health and well-being. That's why it's so important that people have access to these resources, because it's another way to help them, reach their goals and eventually hopefully find their own path to recovery.
Right. And I just want to remind everybody, this is just an overview This conversation is not like we're not covering everything here, but at least you have some type of information and some guidance as to where to find the resources, and and just to start this type of conversation, let's go over mixing drugs or drinks and the dangers of this practice, because it seems like it's something very common.
Yeah, so mixing substances actually puts you at a higher risk for overdose and can increase adverse reactions or different type of drug poisoning. And this can also include non-narcotic prescription medication. So, regular prescription medications, either psychiatric or things that are needed for health conditions. All of these put people at a higher risk for overdose. Something that is commonly seen is people that are prescribed things like benzos, which include like Xanax and Klonopin, and also are drinking on that medication. Because all of these substances are depressants, it really puts a lot of pressure on your respiratory system, your body in general, and unfortunately is more likely to cause adverse reactions and also death. So we advise people not to mix substances or drink on their medication, so that we're able to kind of help them understand how it increases the danger when they are using substances.
And also that implies when people driving and all of that. So let's go over some strategies that people can use not to go up to the point of driving while using drugs or drinking, let's say.
Yeah, and it's a tough situation, I think, because most people, I feel, don't want to make that decision to drink and drive or use substances and drive. And I was just talking to somebody about this the other day, is that unfortunately for people who drink or use substances all day and still have responsibilities or need to leave their homes, their options are either to not do that or to use substances and drive. And one way to help people understand is that any amount of a substance that they ingest does impair their ability to operate any machinery. And that if they know that this is something that they might not be able to stop doing without assistance. So, something that you commonly hear is like people putting their keys in a bowl at the beginning of a party so that way people who are intoxicated aren't leaving. So things like having a trusted, sober person who's able to help you monitor your actions. And when you become maybe unable to make safe decisions for yourself, they're able to step in and assist you in doing so. And just helping people really understand the true risk that there is, not only just legal risk, which I think a lot of people are very focused on, but also how dangerous it can be and, causing the injury or any sort of harm to another individual as well as yourself. So, just having those conversations with people, sometimes that's something that they've never really even discussed with somebody before. And it's become just a part of their daily life. And it's so important to identify those issues and really make it a priority to discuss with people. And a big part about harm reduction is really providing people with this information so that they can make decisions about their own substance use. So what we're doing, unfortunately, we can't make decisions for other people. The best thing that we can do, especially as, family members, for any family that is listening, is being able to provide that information and understanding that we've done all that we can in enabling or empowering rather that individual to make safer decisions themselves. So much of our focus in harm reduction is surrounding that concept. And this is another way, by talking about the dangers of drinking or using any substance in driving and allowing people to have that information moving forward.
So let's go over contact information and also like a helpline or hotline, any contact information that you think could be important for families or providers.
So I did put the helpline number for the Never Use Alone hotline in the chat. That, like I said, is a 24/7 line. I can read that number aloud if you'd like me to, Patricia.
Yeah, because I want to make sure that they have also in this video, but we're also going to put that information below this video, but I would like you to, yeah, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. So the Never Use Alone helpline is again a national line. It's a 24/7 line, and the number for that helpline is 800-484-3731. Another helpline that we have at the Center for Prevention and Counseling, it's our recovery support helpline. It's also a 24/7 line. Anybody can contact that number for more information about how to get themselves or their loved ones help, as well as just connection to the recovery community, help navigating different services in the community. That number, again, is manned by the staff here. We're all familiar with recovery, and most of us are in recovery ourselves, those who answer the helpline number. And that number is 844-722-5327. And it is local to Sussex County. But that being said, if people do call from other counties, we do our best to assist them, and if necessary, connect them to a different resource closer to their area. So that number, regardless of where you are, we accept calls and we'll do our best to assist. And then I guess one thing, it's not really a phone number, but the harm reduction centers in New Jersey, they're available by going to nj.gov/health/harm reduction. And that way you can learn more about, when we discuss syringe exchange programs and what those look like in our community. That's a good resource to be able to look at and understand more about what's available at those harm reduction centers.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. Amber, let's recap, because I know that we just kind of went over like different topics, jumping back and forth. So I just want to make sure that people get the most of this presentation. So would you please just recap? Thank you.
Yeah, so a lot about harm reduction, again, is talking about different concepts and strategies. And if somebody's not ready or willing to stop using substances, they can start getting help and making changes in their lives. Harm reduction does support recovery. And here at the Center for Prevention and at our Recovery Community Center, which is on Newton Sparta Road, we support harm reduction. We will help people wherever they are at on their recovery journey. And we're never going to turn someone away in our recovery pillar based on their current substance use. And we do have clinical support at the Center for Prevention and Counseling as well, in order to get engaged in that process of becoming an outpatient treatment client. It's a little bit of a different situation. There needs to be an evaluation done and an intake done. But once somebody's interested in that, we can also assist them in connecting with that service. We also offer family support services here at the Center for Prevention. We have things like family support meetings, family recovery coaches that people can contact who have had lived experience with a loved one that has a substance use problem. So those are really good resources as well for family members looking to get more of this information about how to help their loved one. And also at the center, we have a big prevention pillar that talks about preventing the onset of substance use in childhood, and also supporting families with younger children, as well as other harms related to tobacco use and things of that nature. And then just touching again on our Recovery Community Center, we have lots of events and meetings for people in recovery. It's so important as people in recovery that we have the opportunity to engage with our community and have fun and an outlet for our creativity and our experience as people in recovery. So that's what we offer at our Newton Sparta Road location. And for any more information on that, you can go to our website, centerforprevention.org, and go to the recovery tab. And we have all of that listed on there. And as we were talking about before, I can be contacted anytime with any further questions or information and about harm reduction or other recovery support services that we offer here at the center. And, I'm hoping that I covered a good amount of what harm reduction is, but like Patricia said, this is just an overview, and we do offer more in-depth trainings and information. We have something we call the harm reduction bifold, which has a lot of different information about harm reduction. It's all compiled into one place. So if anybody was interested in that, we have a PDF version that can be shared with everybody as well.
If you have that PDF, would you please just send it to me so I can add it also in the video description below, so like that people have access to that information as well?
Yeah, I do. I think I did email it to you. That was the harm reduction for substance use
Oh, you want
pamphlet.
me to send that, to put that one?
Yeah,
Okay, all
that
right,
would be
so I'll
great.
put that one.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's what we've worked on over the past couple years, just compiling all this information. It's a really comprehensive packet that can be referred to again and again if needed. There's a lot of information in there.
Awesome. All right. I'm going to put that information so now everybody knows where to find that information. Amber, I just want to say thank you very much for joining us today and for being here, sharing this information with everybody in here. I know a lot of families and providers are going to benefit from this information. And like I mentioned it before, if you have any questions or something, all the contact information will be right below this video. And now also the PDF will be right there also. So you guys gonna have access to all that information. So thank you very much, every single person for being here. And Amber, any final thoughts?
Um, I guess just that I'm really happy to be able to be here and be discussing this. I think a few years ago, this would have been a difficult conversation to broach, but having this community support really makes a difference and it impacts the people that we really care for and try to serve in our community in a way that many people wouldn't really understand in full. But having this community support and being able to have these conversations is a huge deal and something that I'm very excited and passionate about. So thank you so much for having me here.
Thank you. And on behalf of Family Partners, I just want to say thank you to every single person for joining us and to you, Amber. Right now, we are going to jump into Q&A, and thank you very much. I'm going to turn off the recorder, and we're going to go right into Q&A. Thank you very much, every single person.